are now listening to the ATI podcast with Barrett and Josh.
You've been sober oh so long, I can't complain. I'll just say, wait, accidents happen, safe to say that if you wait and mix the alcohol with your blood, trust on me, someone will be heard.
Hey, we are back. 11 years later.
Has it been 11 years?
Yeah, I was looking at the dates on the previous episodes, and we started in, I think it was, 2010 and went into 2011. So I just kind of went by the year that it ended. And
Wow.
So now we're in 2022.
Dude.
A lot's changed. Life has been fun.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of new developments in our lives.
Absolutely.
We're both married now, both have multiple kids,
Got all them chitlins.
and between that and in other things that life has for you, it's kept us busy,
Absolutely, yes.
us and all of our friends. So kind of, obviously, we just kind of wanted to take the time and talk about what and why we're back together and what we kind of want to achieve momentarily. First off, I want to be clear that the show is not for your children.
Not safe for your children.
We will be speaking about adult subjects, using colorful language and everything else that you can imagine and in between.
Save your listening time for your private time.
Yeah, so it's not that we are, going out of our way to be extremely vulgar or anything like that, but we've got crude senses of humor, and we certainly aren't going to shy away from a potentially controversial topic or subject, and perhaps could ruffle some feathers along the way as well. So I would consider us both pretty polite gentlemen and well-mannered, and try to be, very approachable in life and friendly.
Yeah.
Not to say that this is going to be a rage cast or anything either. But, really just kind of the idea of this is to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ultimately, that's what's hopefully going to be translated over the cast waves. I guess it wouldn't be airwaves.
Cast waves, the digital airwaves.
Yeah. So, nonetheless, we're happy to be back, happy to do this. I think we kind of talked about way back when, if you listen to the show, what our motivations were at that time. They're still the same in the sense that, we're creative dudes. We want to do creative things. We want to put our ideas and thoughts out there, collaborate with others, perhaps have chances to promote up-and-coming local artists that we're connected with or that we're aware of, or perhaps through a friend's recommendation, that sort of stuff. Whether it's music, or any other type of anything that's in the arts category, literal artwork, film, short films. I know we have people in our lives, friendships, acquaintances, particularly in and from the area, that are doing big things, and we want to take this opportunity, use this as a platform to kind of pay it forward.
Yeah.
Promote those people. Also have our fun, like we mentioned. So there's going to be, we're coming up with bits and comedy skits and segments, so something that you'll probably kind of see going forward on the podcast here is we'll be discussing really funny news topics. And I think we're all in for a treat whenever we hit that segment for the first time. So
Yeah, I think that's going to be good today.
and I certainly want to just kind of address an elephant in the room just very quickly. Our friend Cato Gatsby, as many persons know him by that'll be listening, he was briefly a part of the podcast as well, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. And we're going to take some time at some point as well, just to kind of honor his memory.
Pay tribute.
And So if you're hearing this and you're friends with Cato and just want to share a memory, it doesn't have to be any, we're not looking for Dr. Phil hour over here or anything like that. We just want to pay tribute to a friend, honor his memory, try to do him some justice.
Right.
In his memory.
Cato played such an important role in so many people's lives in the community, so I feel like it's only appropriate that we pay homage to him.
Absolutely. So, kind of where the podcast is going to go and kind of what our plans for discussion topics are today is really we're going to talk about something very semi-timely, if you will. So a lot of crazy things have happened in the world, of course.
Yeah, since January 1st, 2022, a lot's happened.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Man. But, more specifically, we have had a lot of political changes over the years since we last had the podcast, I believe. I know for a fact we discussed some of what was going on in Syria and so on and so forth. Yeah. Which was topical and timely at the time, the Obama administration in office.
Right.
And we've had a lot of changes since then. We had an unfortunate and dark period, in my opinion, in our political history. I'll just come up with a strong take right now. Under the Trump presidency, just unqualified people doing just absolute asinine things. So, but Trump in particular will be a topic, I'm sure, at various points in times. But now we're under the Joe Biden administration.
Smoking Joe Biden.
Leaving a lot to be desired as well, quite frankly, in many respects. But it just kind of is what it is. But what is going on right now, and will be one of our discussion topics today, is they are actually having hearings, or the things are coming out, if you will, about the hearings that they've had with regards to the January 6th insurrection, the act of domestic terrorism that took place here on our soil. And there's no other way to describe it, quite frankly. So some of the details of that are coming out. We're just kind of talk and discuss and elaborate, and kind of the motivations that went into at least what we've theorized, things that we've observed, read about, stayed engaged in, which a lot of the momentum behind even just Trump and the presidency and some of the crazy things that you saw, kind of where some of those inklings started with things like Pizzagate and the QAnon movement and so on. And don't get me wrong, there certainly is unrest, and there's people dissatisfied when Obama was in office, and after 8 years of him being in office, of course, the pendulum swings. There was 8 years of Bush, there was 8 years of Obama. America was looking for a change. Call it good, call it bad. It was a change. Right. It wasn't a career politician, if you will, and we had that time. So
it was a celebrity politician. It was kind of like a Reagan experiment 2.0, in my opinion.
Yeah. That being said, Reagan was more politically involved prior.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe he was the governor of California, so there's that. He did at least have some
political background, right.
But again, that's going to be a topic today, right? So that might get a little boring. That might get a little monotonous for some, and believe me, there's plenty of fatigue. And kind of the other elephant in the room, of course, is we're in the middle of a pandemic still, as much as St. Francis County tries to act like that's not a thing. Right. It is, and it's, we all have to be and need to be responsible, and there's various ways to do that. However, some of, again, you kind of circling it back to change and unrest, but, right now there's, of course, this global pandemic, and it's affected our ways of life and ways of doing things. So perhaps we're not going to get to do all of the things that we would like to do in the past, like bringing in all the guests, but we are working. Technology's come a long way, guys, in the last 11 years as well. You can Skype people and that sort of thing. And so, the interviews and the guests might be a little bit different than years past, but I think anybody that's a routine podcast listener is kind of used to, those types of conversations, that type of format, if you will. Yeah. But to get a little bit more lighthearted and just kind of throw at you the variety that we like to bring, we're also going to be discussing and it kind of seems like an ambiguous topic, but are things in media that we're excited for this year. So that's going to be an amalgamation of video games, TV shows, and movies, because that's some of our passions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Josh and I have taken the time to kind of take both categories and choose 5 selections there, and
it was very tough.
We're gonna
it was very difficult. There's so much coming in 2022. I'm so excited for. So it was hard for me to put my finger
definitely.
down on,
as soon as you write something down, then you randomly remember something else.
Yeah, you're like, oh man, I gotta get that in there too.
I'm a guy who likes his lists every year. I like to try to put out my favorite movies from the past year, favorite albums, and I typically do like a wrestling one as well.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten around to do that one for last year, but it's just kind of cool to reflect on, collaborate with others, and there's always something that you miss, whether or not it's something you actually listen to and you just, I forgot that came out this year or is coming out this year, but also there's literally things that you're just perhaps not been exposed to, not aware of, that sort of thing. So hopefully, again, with the intent of this and what we're doing here, perhaps we're going to provide something that's going to give you entertainment or enjoyment or comfort in a way that you never suspected, whether it's a piece of movie, cinema, or it's a TV show, or it's a song or a band in particular. So that's kind of what we're going to be hitting here too. And then toward the end, we're still kind of working on some of our social medias and where to get at us sort of stuff. So we will plug what we have to plug. It's probably going to be more personal stuff right now at the moment, but we're in the works of a few things, and kind of our timeline and us wanting to develop out the show further is, quite frankly, somewhat being impacted by myself. Got another kid on the way, so it's kind of complicating things.
Congratulations, Daddy.
Thank you, sir. We're kind of at the end of the finish line here, due any time. So, and then, of course, not to be all about me, but Josh has quite the family as well, and a lot going on. And
3 boys, a wife. Yeah, I mean, I'm nonstop with school and after-school activities.
Yeah.
I mean, you do it too. So,
what's your youngest? Just
River. Yeah. So I have 4 boys. My oldest, he lives with his mom. He'll be 15 this year. Then I have Ian, he's 12, and then Evan is 9, and then my youngest is River. So I have all boys, and boy daddy, yeah, the boy dad. But yeah, so like sports, and that's pretty much life, man. Sports and taking the kids to school and after school activities and orthodontist, the dad life, the good times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and I've got one on the way, and I've got a boy 5, Arlo, and Aurora, she's 8, well, about to be 8. My oldest, my daughter, so that's 3 for myself, and I think I'm going to be calling it quits after this one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I ain't getting any younger, and
after the wife,
it's a lot of responsibility.
Third, we talked to the doctors, and we decided, that was our best interest, was to not have any more children, and I 100% agree with that decision. So
yeah,
I love my kids, don't get me wrong, but
absolutely. So this is going to be a bone of contention, piece of controversy. So vasectomy, where are you at on that?
Dude, I'm all about it. I would go do it, but it's an office visit now, and I don't think I could handle it. I'm just gonna be 100% real. I'm that big of a puss. Chicken. Yeah, puss. Yeah, okay, I can say that. I forgot we're podcasting, but I'm that big of a puss where we're
not on B104. I think we're good. Or Froggy 96.
But yeah, I just I don't see me being able to go into a doctor's office and taking my pants off and being like, yeah, go ahead, put that needle in there, cut me open, slice a couple tubes, sew me up, send me home, give me a packet of peas. You know what I mean?
Right.
We were talking the other day, and women are amazing, dude. The shit that women go through, dude, and the they have to handle. I am so glad I'm a male in that sense. So
yeah, there's no way that I could do what they do. It's maddening.
Yeah,
and we actually, I believe, we got together for my birthday at a restaurant here in Farmington, and we had the vasectomy talk, and our friend Tyler, he had one done, and he was just kind of telling us, oh, it's no big deal. Yeah, you're right back at
dude. Yeah, he was like
packing
really,
your pud in a week. I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I guess that's all I needed to know. I don't know. I just don't. Part of me finds it to be unnecessary,
right.
especially nowadays, and that's another thing that's not necessarily changed drastically, but it's always been kind of highway robbery, and that's medical insurance.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
But even nowadays,
It's
regardless of how
consistently
good
got
of
worse.
coverage that you
Right.
have, whether you have a low, medium, high plan, you're talking paying out of pocket expenses that, and a lot of them are surprises on the back end, because not only are you getting billed from the medical providers, the facilities, but you're getting billed by literally every piece of equipment that you come into
Right.
contact with
Right.
whenever
It's
you
not
go in for an
just-
office visit.
Right.
So it really doesn't matter if it's a routine doctor's visit or a routine procedure. There's always hidden costs.
right.
Yeah, your co-pays. I mean, just everything that it adds up over time.
They find a way to get you. Nickel and dime you.
So that's kind of my part of contention with that. It'd be one thing if I was a millionaire, and that would not.
yeah.
Yeah,
And you
that
could
would be
afford
nothing on the expense chart. But
Right.
I really ultimately couldn't tell you how much it was going to be until obviously you get into the thick of it and
Right.
and you explore that. So.
Yeah.
And I also feel like it's even with women getting a hysterectomy is kind of ridiculous and seems kind of. I mean, there's people that have to do it for
Right,
medical
medical
reasons,
like,
right? Complications.
It's kind of like
and
with
everything.
my wife. She had some issues, complications, and they told her it would be in her best interest to get her tubes tied, just because to prevent it, and so she wouldn't have more complications that could lead to her death. That was the big thing. So she had a C-section. So while they were in there, they just tied her tubes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was kind of convenient. But not everybody always has that situation
Right,
either.
right. Yeah, so like for us, we've had all natural births, about to have another one, or so was the plan. And to do that, that would be, an
Right.
actual invasive procedure.
Yeah, they would have
that
to
was not-
schedule a procedure.
Right,
and,
right.
Yeah.
So like I don't, that's a lot to do to somebody, especially right after they've had a child as well. So
Yeah, they just
I
carried a
think it's
kid for
also
that
an
long.
unreasonable expectation for somebody to get a hysterectomy right away. So
Yeah, especially at a young age.
yeah, oh yeah, that.
And
that
I
is
feel
what
like
is
they
affecting.
I feel like they push stuff like that to younger people now. Like I don't know. Like I feel like to an extent, and then some people I've heard they're say, "Oh, I could never get my tubes tied. They won't let me. They won't do it." But then I've also like, as far as like me, I've had several different doctors push for us to prevent, and not like in an evil way, like we're terrible parents or anything. Just like in a health conscious and like a.
Right.
It's trying to hard. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but
No, I know. I wish you get you that.
but yeah.
So,
Anyway.
But yeah, anyways, we got on that
Tangent.
tangent, right? So that's definitely going to be something to expect on this show. We're going to get in passion topics. We're definitely hard dad talk right now. Maybe this needs to be called the Dad Podcast.
All things
But,
dad.
yeah, but the former show was known as All Things Insane. We're just going to kind of keep it simple and just call it the ATI Podcast going forward. So we're going to be broadcast. You'll be able to find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're going to be on all of your podcasting networks for you to pick us up on.
And hopefully in the future, maybe not real soon, but hopefully in the future we'll do some video on demand on Twitch too, and have some live captures of the podcast. That'd be cool. So
yeah, we especially
into that.
I think it'd be a good time if we had a guest on.
Right.
Or something of that ilk as well.
right.
So we want to develop out into other forms and thresholds, and perhaps, maybe there's enough of a following to do exclusive content for a Patreon, if you
Right.
will, or something of that ilk. So as these things develop and we do these things, we'll certainly be updating you here. So this will be kind of the spot to hear about that. Also, we will be dropping classic episodes. So I still have all of the episodes. I think we did 17 in total previously. So we almost had a year's
Little
worth of
treat for you guys.
podcasts. And it's going to take some time. I have to go through and do some editing to, there's kind of a myth out there in the rights world, if you will, that people believe that you can. Back 11 years ago, they weren't actually going after this as much either. So
Right.
we liked to put in songs that we liked in our breaks. So what to expect this time? I'll be using some music from local artists, actually, with their permission. people that aren't signed and distributed through major labels, and where we have to worry about copyrights and that sort of stuff. So
can't violate nothing. So
right. But it kind of serves two masters. It provides us musical breaks and interludes, if you will, but secondarily promotes them, gets interest in them, and perhaps casts it out to a wider audience. So everybody wins in this agreement and platform, if you will. But, so our old shows, we would take musical breaks and we would play a song that we were into at the time, whether it was perhaps even older songs. That's not going to be the case this time, unfortunately. So it's just the way of the world now. You put anything up, you put things up on YouTube or Twitch even, and you're playing, copyrighted music that's owned by, Sony Music or whomever, and you're going to get taken down. Your channel's going to get flagged and all that fun stuff. So it's really not something that two poor dudes like us can take on as a lawsuit from a major music company. So that's not going to be happening, to say the least. So with that being said, I believe we're ready for our next discussion topic. So we're going to hit you guys actually with a break right now. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about the insurrection and a little QAnon chat as well. So stay tuned. Right, y'all, welcome back. Welcome. Little country boy coming at me. Southeast Missouri from the Boot Heel. Ooh. All right, so we're going to be discussing actually very topical for this area because there were some people from this area involved in the
Isn't this a national holiday around here?
Yeah, what's that? The insurrection?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is. I know that there was a lady from Potosi who was arrested involved in this. Oh my God! And I know
I did not even know that.
I had some connections. Let's say business acquaintances. That's accurate. That knew some folks in this area that were being searched to take statements as to their involvement because there was literally buses taken out of this area to DC to attend this.
I would say that shocks me, but it really doesn't.
So if you've been trying to hide from the topic and you really are not, and we're not experts. I don't have a journalism degree. I fancy myself a shitty DIY journalist, a guy with a lot of interests, and I just like to read about things. So I'm just going to approach this as any other journalist would and try to give you the who, what, where, when, and why with regards to what took place. You formulate your opinions and kind of the talk and what the charge was. So, and I'm sure there'll be gaffes, and that's something that you're going to love about the show. We'll have our momentary gaffes, if you will. Again, we're not perfect, but hopefully it provides some entertainment. So, January 6, 2021. Why is this date important? Of course, this was Trump and his boo-boo face that he had where he held his rally. And he incited people to go down to the Capitol building and to take back their government.
Yeah, stop the steal.
And stop the steal, and made very inaccurate claims alleging that voting machines were stealing the election and these mail-in ballots, and they were really inciting, they being, Trump and his party, and majority of them Republican, obviously, inciting folks, trying to discredit our lawful election that we had, and trying to overturn the results. And why is January 6th in particular important? Why did they choose this day? Well, this was the day that they were voting on the election results. Everybody was confirmed. Yeah, everybody was confirming the election results in the houses of Congress, and in part had to have the vice president there, Mike Pence, to seal the deal. And kind of a part of the motivations was to try and get Pence to decline the election results in particular. And so there was a lot of rage and incitement against Pence because, Pence took the stance that this is what the people voted for, not what we wanted, but I have to rule in favor of what the people voted for. So it's crazy that this is even up for debate, mind you. Like, I just feel like this never in our history before. It's certainly not in our lives. Okay. So if you're 40-ish years old, you've certainly never seen anything like this.
Yeah,
there's no question about it. And so, you're talking all the way back, nobody alive. It's been well since the 1800s that what our capital was attacked.
Right.
So it's and I find it to be inexcusable. So let's talk about the who. Who was involved in this? Well, we talked about where it started and where it was motivated at and the date. The rally that took place, led by Trump and team. So really the actors, those who were involved more so in the rioting aspect, the attacking the Capitol, damaging property, is we just kind of ambiguously can call them all far-right activists.
Right.
However, if you want to get more specific of that, kind of your primary actors in this group were QAnon supporters, which there was the QAnon shaman that's, world famous at this point.
As you say, if you don't know who we're talking about, it's the guy that wore the buffalo horned hat.
Yeah, the headdress.
Didn't wear the shirt.
No shirt.
Yeah, that guy. I'm sure you've seen him plastered all over social media.
Yeah, and memes and what have you.
Yeah.
So there's QAnon supporters, and we're going to talk more about them later. Oath Keepers, again, all kind of an alt-right group here. Proud Boys, here we go again, alt-right group. And then a 3%er movement. And I will say that there's also a misconception, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in my breakdown, that just in D.C. wasn't the only place, even though this is what we're going to be focusing the conversation on. There was other acts taking place at other places. This was a mass coordinated thing.
Right.
And a lot of it was how did all these people all over the United States decide to do this? Well, A, these affiliations that we talked about. B, social media.
Right.
That's how all these people meet each other. This is how they get connected. Message boards, things like 4chan, for example.
Right. It was organized.
It was organized.
Yeah,
it was premeditated.
Right. People don't just show up. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
Somebody, if you follow the far right movement, there's somebody that's calling out. I don't want to say shots, but calling out things, and then people are following. You know what I'm saying? That's what it seems like with that movement. You know what I mean? Like, to an extent, certainly. Like, we need to do this, and then everybody flocks and does it. Right. You know what I mean? Right. That kind of situation.
So let's move on to the what. So, of course, stormed the U.S. Capitol. Again, I'm just going to speak primarily about this at this moment, with hopes to overthrow members of Congress and governing bodies. Some allegedly seeking to hang Pence specifically.
Hang Mike Pence.
Yes, those were the chants that were taking place. So this isn't really a matter or a discussion of, and I keep saying Republicans because they were in power at the time, and it was the meeting that they were having, the rally, if you will, that kind of charged some of these people. But I'm not, obviously not everybody that was at the rally was at the Capitol doing the things that they were doing illegally, and literally harming Capitol Police in particular. But when we say these people, we're referring to these actors, this subgroup of this larger gathering that took place. So moving on to the where, of course, the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C. When did it happen? We've addressed that, January 6, 2021. Why did this happen? Well, and this is kind of my theorized bullet point type thing, and I think it's relatively accurate, but number one, COVID prevention measures. There is certainly and has been and was a resistance the very minute that anybody talked about, mask mandates, shutting down in-room dining,
anything that would alter people's world,
mass gatherings, theaters shut down. So here's that COVID talk again that I know everybody's so tired of.
Right.
But it again, understand the motivations. So we'll call it COVID unrest, if you will. And hey, listen, I hate COVID too. I'm tired of it.
Right.
I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of having to deal with the complications that, having this deadly virus that, millions of people have died from.
Right.
Unnecessarily, quite frankly, in most cases, regardless of where it originated from.
Right. Or how it originated doesn't matter.
But
right.
it's important to understand that a lot of these type of acts that took place are because of, everything that happens to everybody in their life and the way you behave in that is an amalgamation and a congregation of events that's happened in your life. That's,
right.
That's why you determine to make some of the decisions that you do. You act on your previous experiences.
Right. Yeah.
So we're not just gonna focus in on that. It's the other whys are the voting rights for Americans. Some people didn't agree with mail-in ballots, which that's a lot of the measures that people were taking to reduce heads coming in on election day because they expected the highest voter turnout in American history with regards to how many in total numbers voted. And guess what? They did.
Right.
They had 140 million people vote in this election. Now, that's still not half of America, which is sad.
Right.
But nonetheless, it was close. And certainly more than in years past. Whenever we have, almost 400 million people in this country now, and that's the turnout. It's been said a million times, but it's pretty obvious that elections and the complexions of them can change drastically.
Right.
If 70% of Americans voted,
Yeah.
It really doesn't take that many people to make the change. Now, there's factors in that. Incarcerated people, of course, folks that perhaps don't have voting rights,
right?
Which is another political discussion topic nowadays. But so certainly there's ways that we can't necessarily have 100% of people in the country voting. But again, it's important to realize that people had some distaste for the rights, what rights we have voting wise.
Right, and like the preventative measures to even stop people from being able to, you know what I mean? Like,
and then also, again, this gets back into initially why we said this happened, but the folks were goaded by the sitting president and politicians within his party on the right, and the defunct, the losing of the general election just kind of cracked. I guess Trump and the party, if you will, and they resorted to extreme measures and, called governors and told them to find votes and all this wild shit that happened.
Which, speaking of that, didn't they open up some kind of investigation in Georgia over that?
Yes, they did.
Like recently? I thought I read that the other day, that there was some kind of investigation that they just opened over that whole matter. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, and it, believe me, this isn't going to be the last that you hear of these things. And I'm not saying necessarily from us, but in the media, like, a lot of these details are starting to come out with what took place. Like, for example, like, we prepared this material like a couple of weeks ago and had discussions between us. But even since then, it came out that Trump in particular was in the process of trying to mobilize military to take away voting machines during the election. Like, he literally inquired about doing that.
Wow.
Which is insane for you to think that a president would ever consider doing something like that, taking votes out of the American people's hands.
Especially one that supposedly supports democracy.
Absolutely. And secondarily, like, there's Republicans that use those machines to vote for. Like, it's not like a Democratic party
like only
machine.
Democrats will use voting machines.
I know, it's absurd. So it's like he's
or mail-in
literally
ballots.
And then that too. And speaking of mail-in ballots, the motherfucker did an advance ballot himself.
Right, he mailed in a ballot. Right, he requested it
Which is
in New York.
Absurd.
Right,
it's absurd.
And then talked about how inaccurate they were, and
So people don't be fooled by this guy, and I really find most of my conversations with people, and I try to hear people out, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. And what's great about this country, this world, we're all different. We all like different things.
That's what America's about.
But
it's a melting pot of culture.
Seriously,
and ideas.
this guy, and we're going to get into more of the QAnon discussion of him. He's not the second coming of Christ. And his behavior alone should tell you that. But, so Yes, it was the Trump's mob making false claims of the electoral results. And they were looking to interrupt specifically the electoral vote that was going down, the actual ritual
For the
that takes
certification
place.
of the
Right.
president, yeah.
So, also, I wanted to take the time to explicitly, mention the fact of the other locations that I said that we would get into. So, attacks by anti-government militia groups also took place in Capitol buildings across the United States. So, in Arizona, California, Colorado, Kansas, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Wyoming.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So, this isn't the only place, but of course it is what it is, and it's where it is, and it holds special significance. So therefore it got a lot of coverage.
Right.
And then Georgia Secretary of State, Brad, I think Raffensperger, and his staff, were evacuated from the state capitol in Atlanta because of protesters with assault rifles that were entering inside and trying to track him down specifically.
Dang,
and
dude.
so this kind of goes back to that discussion where Trump called them and told them to find votes. And this is, this happened in the hanging Chad thing happened in 2000, if you remember,
Right.
with Bush and Gore. Mm-hmm. So that was a semi-contested election, of course, in that regard.
Right.
And it is what it is, and I don't want to get into that, but specifically,
That's
but
a different conversation.
that was way, like, think about. And again, I was younger. I was a teenager when this happened. So, but this is when I started becoming politically aware, interested, keeping tabs on things, if you will, trying to stay well informed. It was not contentious like this is now.
Right.
While there might have been gatherings and discussions and rallies and so on and so forth that were had during that time frame, it was nothing of a malicious. And certainly not attacking the Capitol building, right?
Right,
So,
right. We never got
we
to
keep
that
like
point.
avoiding to the elephant in the room, if you will. So, also a misconception with everything that took place. So, I'm just going to give you some talking points for whenever you have drunk uncle over for the next family event. There's a lot of
that man was the best president this country's ever had.
Yeah, so here we go, right? So you guys, there's people listening to this perhaps have that opinion, and that's fine. You're entitled to it.
Right.
But please tell us your reasons.
Right.
And please make sure that they are rooted in fact, history, reality. Don't come with this second coming of Christ type talk about the guy. It's really funny right now, too, not to get too sidetracked here. Okay, so you saw what Biden did the other day, right?
Yeah, calling that guy a stupid son of a bitch.
Yeah, the same fucking reporter that John McCain in 2007 ate his ass in front of everybody.
What did he ask him specifically? I'm trying to remember.
I don't recall,
I don't remember either.
but
He's like, what kind of question is that?
Yeah, he like dressed him down. He was like, do you even know how to do your job?
Right.
Like, and I had somebody come at me and say, oh, what Biden did is so unpresidential, and Trump really showed him how to be a president. And I was like, oh, you mean like grab her by the pussy?
Or
like that was real presidential?
Mocking a disabled journalist?
Absolutely. Or let's say throwing the shithole countries thing.
Yeah.
Remember that? Didn't
yeah.
want to give any aid or help to Haiti.
Yeah. Or Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Well, Puerto Rico, let's talk about that. He was down there fucking throwing paper towels like he was Kobe Bryant at the free throw line at people.
You want some paper towels?
Yeah.
You got some paper
like he was
towels.
on
Like
a goddamn,
Oprah.
like he was on a game show or something.
Guess what? Everybody here is going to get a package of paper towels.
It's absurd. It's just really absurd. Just looking at you just have to look at a person's character, look at their behavior. The Apprentice was a fun reality show when I guess it came out or whatever. But really, the guy's also been a fraudulent, millionaire, billionaire, in many occasions, and been found out as well.
Yeah, like let's talk about Trump University. Let's talk about Trump Steaks. Let's talk about
Absolutely.
Trump Airlines. Let's talk about like how many
His
families,
casinos.
right? How many families did he have to pay out over that Trump University thing? Because it was a whole complete bogus deal. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Or, talking about immigrants stealing jobs and the guys hiring European immigrants and underpaying them and not paying them,
And using Chinese steel in all of his developments.
Right. And talking about China's the enemy of the American state and how, we must have trade wars with China.
But you look inside of Make America Great Again memorabilia, and guess where it says? Made in China.
All of it comes from China. Yeah.
So, again,
Ivanka, doesn't she have some kind of deal
they
with
all
something
have
in China?
international ties. They're actually as a part of speculation and also trying to get this tax document. There's going to be so much more that comes out too, because all of his kids are like indicted in New York as well.
Yeah.
And they're really coming after them. They have to reveal all their tax information and stuff.
Right.
But they have business ties in Russia, and that's where kind of the whole collusion and talk and the P-tape talk and all that
right.
fun stuff came into play as well. But, again, back to this and to kind of steer the shit back in
right.
on the specific topic of January 6th again. A lot of discussion I've heard from the drunk uncle types, if you will, and we'll just call them that for now, is that, those were Americans there that day and they were using their American right for freedom of speech. But, in the same breath, these people will come to the dinner table with talks about the Black Lives Matter and,
right.
and the riots. And they call them riots. They don't
right.
even call them protests.
Right.
It's just all of them are rioting, with that type of talk. And, hey, listen. People destroying, individuals' personal property.
It's never acceptable.
Yeah, it's never acceptable. And I do not mean to make light of that or say that I personally support that. But understand that just as we preface this conversation that this was a minority of actors doing these things.
Right.
And what the motivations were and how they were charged up. Who did this? Who goaded these people into doing these things?
Right.
At the end of the day, unstable people are going to do unstable things.
Yep.
And it just depends on what way the wind's blowing that day, and it's going to happen. But you certainly don't need to goad these types of folks into literally destroying capital property, stealing capital property, bludgeoning
people. Right.
They bludgeoned a Capitol officer to death. Again, back to the drunk uncle guy. So let's say drunk uncle, says, these were Americans. They were there protesting and doing everything lawful, expressing their First Amendment rights and their Second Amendment rights and yada, yada, yada. While all of that is not wrong necessarily, there are limitations on those things.
Right.
So whenever you start behaving in criminal behavior,
right.
and going through barricaded doors at federal property, unfortunate things like the young lady who was a veteran who lost her life happens. But also, don't be a fucking criminal. Don't break down doors. Don't bust through windows. If you're told to get back, get back. Yeah,
especially by a law enforcement.
It's really that simple.
Officer.
And that's another thing that I find funny. Again, another hot button topic. The blue line. We support the blue. We back the blue. But when it's Capitol Police,
right,
it's okay to bludgeon them to death with a fire extinguisher. That's okay, though.
Yeah.
And another thing that's kind of coming out in these hearings right now, too, which is laughable, is they're trying to say that Trump authorized National Guard, but D.C. turned it down. Okay, well, I'll give you a little education here. D.C., it essentially has statehood power in that regard.
Right. It's its own entity.
It's its own entity. Of course, they have their own delegates, so on and so forth. So the mayor of that city acts almost like a governor as far as power is concerned. So they specifically, D.C. has their own National Guard, so they can actually request National Guard to be deployed. The mayor requested 48 hours before that National Guard be deployed. It was authorized by the Department of Defense, but Trump's acting Department of Defense director only authorized it, but without weapons. So that's another thing to take in consideration. Right. So the National Guard wasn't even allowed to have weapons when they were patrolling the Capitol and the crowd. So meanwhile, you have these actors that we talked about, these far right folks, the QAnons, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, who are extremely militant themselves, the 3%er movement folks, those folks came in with ARs, assault rifles, AKs, loaded to the brim, a lot of them. And what do you think you're going to accomplish by bringing this into the Capitol? These folks, no bones about it. They thought they were going to overthrow the government that day, which, love him, hate him, Joe Biden. He did have a kind of straightforward, honest quip. I believe it was right after it happened, not too long after it happened. Let's put it that way. And he said something to the effect of, I don't know what you folks think you're going to achieve. This is me paraphrasing, not word for word, but,
right.
We are the U.S. government. We literally have weapons that can neutralize you. We have weapons of chemical warfare and,
right.
Things of that ilk. Like, you are bringing a knife to a gunfight, essentially.
Right.
And the dynamic of what the government can do if they actually wanted to do.
Right. That's why I've never understood that as an argument for the Second Amendment.
So,
to protect myself from a tyrannical government. Well, I'm going to tell you right now.
That might have been true at one time,
yeah,
but the
but it's not 1700 anymore.
The Constitution is an outdated document in many respects.
Right.
I'm all for reform. We did the best that we had at the time we did it, and we took from many ideologies, political ideologies, primarily, Rome, in developing our constitution and our government. We want to get away from a tyrannical, but there's still things in our past that we did that was acceptable at the time, but is not, it's a blemish on our record.
Right. Yeah. Times change.
This country is not the white Anglo-Saxons' home.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's just not.
This is a Native American land that was taken away from those people unlawfully, just literally, disease, famine was brought upon them.
Rape, pillage, burn,
yes,
murder.
Literally, and no exaggeration to it, so, and kept pushing them west, and it's just, it's really unacceptable. And now a thing, too, is that we're literally trying to not teach about racism in school.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even really know what racism was at all because I was not raised in a bigoted way or anything of that ilk when I was younger.
Right.
I actually lived in St. Louis, lived in an all-black complex. I knew that people, it's obvious that people don't necessarily all look like you, but, I didn't even know, I heard this, and I'm probably getting the phrase wrong here, but I've heard that racism is learned, It's not something that you're innately with. And I can say without a doubt, from my own personal experience, I didn't even really know anything about what people say negatively about other races and that sort of thing until I even moved down to this area. And it's not to say, regardless of where you live and what you do, or where you're at, racism isn't exclusive to Southern Missouri.
Right.
Racism is everywhere.
It's a global issue, right?
It is a global issue, absolutely. Xenophobia and all of those things. It's a real thing. And I don't know why, but it just kind of seems like now, especially since, the Trump presidency, like there's almost an unabashed racial divide again as well, and certainly some of it has to do with the slayings of African Americans right now as well. Unjustly, not to say that it hasn't ever been going, it's been going on literally forever, the existence of this country.
Right. Yeah.
But, the advents of technology, like we talked about, things getting caught on camera.
Oh, yeah.
The George Floyd situation.
You can't do anything in public.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I mean? I in a way, I'm happy about that. Let's start calling people out for how they are. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
Body
if you want to
kings.
be that way, then, be that way. Let's see it. Don't hide your true self. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's just how I feel about it.
So, again, we're getting on a side tangent here, but all of these things that are a divide right now in our country is kind of going back into what took place here on January 6th. There's people with strong opinions, and, This is this social media phenomenon that goes on right now too. Everybody kind of gets locked in their echo chamber. And as they've also brought some of these social media companies into the Capitol, they've found that they are prying on people's Discord. So, like, for example, if you and I have Facebook accounts, which just about everybody does, of course, so this is an easy example to use. If you don't have many interactions or imprints on what you post that day, it doesn't get prioritized in anybody's feed.
Right.
And they started to develop that in the last pretty hardcore with, all new algorithms and things that they're implementing.
To like give you relevant information to what you're interested in based off your
so
interactions.
You used to be able
Facebook.
to at one point about I'll say 6 years ago. It's probably longer than that than I'm even putting together here now. But there was an option at one time to choose most recent on your timeline or top topics or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely a way to filter it. Yeah.
And there may still be. I don't really frequent it anymore, but it became more difficult to do that, though.
Right.
And now they've been found to, yes, we do prioritize the most impressions. So especially if there's... let's say Josh posts a topic and says, Trump is a racist, xenophobe, bigot, okay, on his discussion thread. And then somebody of an opposite opinion comes on and then they say, well, this is what Joe Biden is, okay? So now that discord has started there. And that's going to probably warrant a lot of other reactions. Let's say you have hundreds of friends and they have hundreds of friends and maybe your post is public, so if they comment on your stuff, it'll show up in other people's timelines and feeds. So there you go, and before you know it, there's 200, topics, but maybe 70% of the conversation is just you and this other person, right? So then you become prioritized in the feed that day because of what you've got going on is creating a lot of chitter chatter versus what other people might have going on. So this echo chamber that we're talking about is kind of getting exacerbated right now. And Facebook's not the only one guilty of it. They're just kind of the big one that was found having done this.
Because they have the numbers.
Right. Because I'm pretty confident, I'd have to check, but maybe TikTok's starting to get there, but I'm very confident that Facebook has the most subscribers of all social media.
I'm pretty sure they still run the
show. Yeah. And then you take into account that they own other social media entities like Instagram, for example. I don't know that necessarily gets lumped into that, but everything's integrated from one to the other.
Well, and just like you were talking about impressioning, like with targeting and stuff like that, like you can create any kind of post on a page on Facebook and pay to have it target certain types of people,
right?
In certain audiences.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and to me, that's kind of wild with politics. Like,
right?
I almost don't know if I agree with that, but. That's another discussion too.
But then, then that gets slippery, and that's kind of a hot topic item right now too. Is censorship,
right?
And who has the right to censor you? I just got news for you folks. Facebook doesn't owe you a fucking thing.
Right.
They don't have to protect your First Amendment rights. They're a company, and if you put content up that ensues or infers bodily harm to anybody or anything like that, they are more than welcome to take it down because they have this little thing called terms and conditions that you probably never fucking read or cared to. And you're agreeing to a lot of things that you don't realize.
Yep.
And just because of that simple disclosure, you've already given away your rights.
Right.
And I can't believe how many people that I've had to explain this to that just don't get it. They think they can get on there
Facebook
and say what they want. Yep. I hear that all the time. Facebook jail. It's like, seriously. And I find it odd that, like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure there's people that have faced repercussions at their professions, if you will, especially if they work with the public, some of their hot, takes on Facebook or what have you. But, just don't be, not that I'm like encouraging anybody to be a terrible person, but like Facebook's not the place to share your shitty fucking viewpoints, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of that. You know what I mean? Like I see something that makes me hot headed and then I'll be like, oh, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree. 120%.
So, the group that kind of got the most popularity, quite frankly, on this January 6th business is, I would say, without question, QAnon. QAnon is just a large group of folks, and I find it to have started really because they share a lot of the same ideologies, same batshit craziness, quite frankly, as, you know, the Pizzagate movement that kind of started on 4chan and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But so QAnon in particular, so I actually pulled from a Rolling Stone article by Amanda Ross that was published in November 2017. So I'll be occasionally reading some excerpts from her article here to kind of chronologically put things in together for folks here as well. So I just wanted to give her the kudos for having written it, of course, and that's. But we used multiple references. Huffington Post, NBC News, CBS News, Rolling Stone, The Independent. I used like 7 different news sites to kind of get our notes in order just to make sure we had things accurate. You know, like Wikipedia for date references, so on and so forth. So, Pizzagate, back to that. So what is it? It's the belief that Hillary Clinton and company were running a sex trafficking ring in the basement of a pizza parlor.
I mean, like, I don't know, man.
It's unbelievable that sentence just came out of my mouth. And hey, listen, anything's possible in the world, unfortunately.
Right.
You know, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we could get
and
into
the
that.
Clintons have been known to have convoluted and associated with Jeff Epstein. And but guess who else was? Trump.
Yep.
And you can find a plethora of photos and gifs of him online with Jeffrey Epstein, and there's more to come on the Jeffrey Epstein situation because Giselle has had to disclose information that she didn't have to previously as far as the identities that were disclosed on their planes, the people they were taking to the private islands and so on and so forth. So there's actually, I knew it was in the 20th-ish day range of the month, and so I need to actually circle back and read on that, but she was supposed to have another hearing and disclose some of her John Does on her dossier or whatever she had list,
The Black
if you
Book.
will. Yeah, the Black Book, right. So, anywho, so again, back to the article. I just kind of want to clarify exactly the whole Pizzagate thing, and this is, unfortunately, this is a real thing that happened that I'm reporting on here. So if you don't know about it, this is probably going to be kind of shocking to you. And this is the direct quote from the article. The revelations overcame Edgar Madison Welch like a hallucinatory fever. On December 1st, 2016, the father of 2 from Salisbury, North Carolina, a man whose pastimes included playing Pictionary with his family, tried to pursue 2 friends to join him on a what he called rescue mission. Alex Jones, the InfoWars host, was reporting that Hillary Clinton was sexually abusing children in satanic rituals a few hundred miles north in a basement at Washington, D.C. pizza restaurant. Welch told his friends that the raid on a pedo ring might require them to sacrifice the lives of a few for the lives of many. A friend texted, sounds like we are freeing some oppressed pizza from the hands of the evil pizza joint. Welch was undeterred. 3 days later, armed with AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and a .38 handgun and holding a knife, he strolled into a restaurant headed towards the back where children were playing ping pong as waitstaff went to the table whispering to customers to get out. Welch maneuvered into the restaurant kitchen. He shot open a lock and found cooking supplies. He whipped opened another door and found an employee bringing a fresh pizza dough. Welch did not find any captive children. Comet Ping Pong does not even have a basement, but he did prove, if there was any lingering doubts after the election, that fake news had its real consequences.
This guy's insane, dude.
Welch's arrest was the culmination of an election cycle dominated by fake news, by attacks of legitimate press. Several media outlets quickly traced the contours of what became known as Pizzagate. The claim that Hillary Clinton and the pedophile ring started in a Facebook post, spread to Twitter, and then went viral with some help of far-right platforms like Breitbart and InfoWars. Breitbart's another discussion topic for another time as well.
Yeah.
Actually, coincidentally, the guy who helped co-found the Huffington Post, which is a left-leaning news organization, started Breitbart, and is a far-right news network now. So that right there, and now we're talking about corporate media. I'm going to pause right there. We're talking about corporate media. This is somebody capitalizing on people's political interests.
Right.
Clearly, how do you go from far left to far right? Oh, just like a conviction came over you. No, you saw a business opportunity.
Right, you took advantage of the situation.
You made your own competition, essentially. So people need to understand the motivations that go behind this to start with. They literally are capitalizing on money. That was the motivation of creating these news networks. Okay? So back to the article. But it was unclear whether Pizzagate was mass hysteria of the work of politicos with real resources and agendas. It took a better part of a year and even 2 teams of researchers to sift through this digital trail. We found ordinary people, online activists, bots, foreign agents, and domestic political operatives. Many of them were associates of the Trump campaign. Others had ties with Russia. Oh, there you go again.
Shocker.
The Trump and Russia connection. Are we shocked? I think not. Working together through often unwittingly, they flourish in a new post-truth information ecosystem, a space where false claims are defended and absolute facts. What's different about Pizzagate, says Samuel Woolley, a leading expert in computational propaganda. It was retweeted and picked up by some of the most powerful forces in American politics. So it's one thing for these, and then here we go into the freedom of press topic.
Right.
These news outlets to perpetuate a false narrative, if you will, as it is, or conspiracy theory in this case. But it's another thing for then political actors to take that, people of standing in this country, and provide validity, or at least try to a veil of validity to it. Let's put it that way. That's dangerous. That's exactly what that is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what is QAnon? Again, so back to the QAnon topic. Well, QAnon has a wide-ranging and a very odd belief system, is the best way to put it. They have this completely unfounded theory that Trump is waging a secret war against elite satanic worshipping pedophiles in the government, business, and the media. So here's the ties to Pizzagate. Doesn't that sound familiar? Right? Isn't this just like literally what we talked about?
Right.
So QAnon's not an original thought.
It probably goes back all the way to like Tea Party times, or even before then.
There's a lot of coincidental overlap. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Which again, Tea Party is something you're going to hear us expound upon in the retro episodes because it was a big thing at the time.
Right. It was relevant.
That was the midterm movement in 2010 that we were having a lot of discussions topics about on the show. On those classic episodes, you're going to hear us drop it, talk about it, and so this is a callback right now. So back to QAnon's theories. Most of their ideals are largely non-inclusive, extremely racist, and or bigoted, particularly against the Jewish religion. They really have a hard-on for George Soros in particular. Talking about how he got all of his gold from working for the Nazis in internment camps and that sort of thing. QAnon believers also have speculated that their fight, will lead to a day of reckoning where prominent people such as former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, will be arrested and executed. So we kind of already been through all of that. Trump had promised that he was going to lock her up and go after everybody.
Right.
Never happened. For good reason, because they had nothing that should tell you everything.
Right.
And then many of their ideas that Trump is somehow in the role of Jesus and he's that type of evangelical character are part of those types of doctrines that's going to help bring on the second coming of Christ, which is just obviously totally absurd in and of
It's just
itself.
ludicrous, man. It's like fantasy. I just feel like I don't know. It's just like there's no real thinking anymore. You know what I mean? It's just like
It's absurd that anybody would just hear this and automatically think,
Like, yep.
I can believe that.
yeah, I can get on board with that. That sounds like that's what's going on.
So people, of course, this has caused for investigation, and people have gone back, okay, well, then where is this QAnon? So you see where the step went from the Pizzagate thing, and now this is kind of tied into some bigoted and xenophobic ideas, and that, religious connotations, if you will, meddled in with the pedophile accusations and what have you. This actually goes back to the 4chan talk again. So we've talked about that a few times. So in October of 2017, anonymous user put up a series of posts and messages on the chat board 4chan. They signed off as Q. So this is the QAnon. This is Q that you see on all the t-shirts, and everybody's waiting for their Q drops, if you will. And so where did the Q come from? Well, this person came up with this bogus alleged Q clearance is what they said that they had from U.S. security.
So it was like a Type Q security clearance.
Right. So they were trying to say that they were being given this privileged information with essentially allusions that they were some type of agent working for the government and they were in the know. These messages became known as Q drops or breadcrumbs, often written with cryptic language and peppered with slogans and pledges and pro-Trump things. So who believes this? Well, unfortunately, we know that at least thousands do, at least as far as internet trails. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say tens of thousands. And I'm sure a lot of you have had unfortunate conversations with perhaps family members or those around you who kind of, even if innocently, have heard these things and then regurgitated them again.
Right.
In some of these discussion topics. So the QAnon supporters really kind of took to, obviously, social networking sites, making groups on Facebook. They're on Twitter, Reddit, made YouTube videos, and they just have exploded since 2017. Now, there are companies that have taken measures to take them down, but even a part of Mueller's investigations, he kind of that was kind of actually riddled in with this. Like there was theories with QAnon that Mueller's investigation was going to bring to life through Hillary's emails and all this other bullshit, all of these pedo rings that were happening as well. Which is just absolutely wild. So the popularity of this group, unfortunately, hasn't diminished whatsoever. And regardless of how much things do not come to fruition or they get debunked, I talked about the Mueller business, but also another huge thing that took place here recently is the whole JFK thing.
Yeah, the return of JFK.
Yes, JFK Jr.
Yeah, JFK Jr. was going to come back where his father was publicly executed in Dallas.
Yes,
and lay claim
the
to the
Dealey
presidency,
Plaza.
right?
Yes, was going to lay claim to the president, return from the dead, and somehow he has the power to reinstate Trump as the president. Is what it was.
Okay, first of all, let's just say somehow
he never held public office.
Let's just say somehow JFK Jr. comes back, right? He's alive somehow. He didn't die in a plane wreck. Even if he does come back and lay claim to the presidency, do you think that JFK Jr. would be a QAnon supporter or a Trump supporter?
Exactly.
It doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean?
No, it's absurd.
Yeah, I mean...
whenever one of my friends told me about this JFK thing, because I hadn't had a chance to read about it yet, back when it happened, I said, well, my God, my literal immediate hot take reaction was, oh my God, JFK Jr. would be rolling in his grave, but I guess he didn't have a grave because he died in a plane crash, and I don't think they ever found his body. Or if they did,
I think it was in the water, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll ever find him.
That was my colorful take immediately. So, anywho, what kind of impact does this have? Well, clearly, we're talking about January 6th. QAnon had a lot to do with that. Again, the QAnon shaman, folks wearing Q stuff, having Q flags, yada, yada, yada.
Well, and the general disposition for American governments and the general distrust or American government and politics, and
Right.
just the general distrust of it all.
Like they essentially, I guess, kind of the power that they have. Obviously, there's numbers, and any group that organizes well enough has some type of impact, if you will. But they drive hashtags on social media. They coordinate abuse of perceived enemies, such as politicians, celebrities, journalists that they believe are covering up pedophiles. Not just threatening messages online, but Twitter in particular says it acted against QAnon because of potential for offline harm. Several QAnon believers have been arrested for making threats and taking their actions from online to offline. In a notable case in 2018, a heavily armed man blocked a brigade over the Hoover Dam. Matthew Wright, he later pleaded guilty to terrorism charge. The U.S. conspiracy theory U.S. conspiracy theory shut school festival. A Pew Research Center study in September 2020 found that nearly half of Americans had heard of QAnon. So that's double the number from 6 months prior. So that, like,
Right.
you're talking, this is big. Right?
Yeah.
Half of not even half Americans vote. We just made that point. But
Yeah.
half of them have heard of QAnon.
Right. And
That's concerning.
yeah.
And of course, they support Trump, and Trump has been a vehicle. And they've had many retweets. Their supporters have had many retweets by Trump and his family members. It's just crazy, the platform that they have. And there's literally now, again, this is absurd that I'm even saying this. There's a QAnon politician in office.
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And there's ones that support him too.
It's absurd, and she's of Georgia. Again, was elected to Congress in November of 2020. There's one from Colorado also. Supporters of the QAnon movement. They were among the crowd that stormed the Capitol building again whenever this took place on January 6th. Several of the prominent activists were spotted inside the building, of course. And again, they had those Q-themed banners. So, maybe if you didn't know anything about QAnon before, maybe you feel a little bit educated. I'm not here to do a deep dive on them. I just kind of wanted to give kind of who they were, why they were involved at the Capitol. They find Trump to be this deity, if you will, this God. Like he's like almost like Jesus to them, and
Right.
he's going to bring forth the revelation and what have you. And that's literally how these folks talk in their message threads and things of that ilk. Is a romanticized for end times, and that Trump essentially is the doom rider riding in the archangel, if you will.
Savior.
Which is just
The great
absurd.
tangerine savior.
Yeah, and they can't even keep that straight, quite frankly, like what his role is and all of. I mean, he is worshipped. There's no question about that.
But here's the deal: like, Trump has never specifically tied himself to anybody or disclaimed to be tied to anybody, and he does that for a reason.
Exactly. He leaves that. That's like why he wouldn't speak down about Proud Boys,
Right. Because he
and-
knows that he needs that support, regardless if it's right
and the
or not.
KKK and white
Right.
nationalists and
Right.
so on and
He
so
won't
forth.
denounce
It's-
them.
He won't denounce them because he has their support, and he needs all the support that he can get.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Yep.
So we're going to kind of close the topic there. Of course, this thing's developing, and we could go on more about it, but really the intent of the segment was just kind of educate people so they can at least hold a dinner conversation with family,
Yeah. About what it really
and
is.
that sort of thing,
The impacts
and
of
be
it.
a little bit more informed. And of course, we've got opinions, and we littered them in there, and we, threw in our colorful takes, if you will. But we're going to come back after this break with a more entertaining segment about entertainment.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we'll see you guys on the other side.